thank you very much to Stainless today for actually organizing this. And, the conference theme is the metal powering industrial growth and economic progress. Uh, all well said and done. And we're talking about applications, we're talking about new applications, we're talking about stainless steel, driving growth, etc. Where is the people? Where is the workforce? Are they skilled enough? Do we have people enough? And I'm not just talking at the blue collar level, I'm also talking at the white collar level. And that's what this chat is all about. Thank you, Mr. Nehru, for joining us. And just to sort of give you a magnitude of the numbers involved, we at Stainless Academy had engaged PwC, and they did mention, based on certain data figures that have come out, there are about 32 million people employed in the unorganized sector, in the steel sector. And there are about 35 million people which are employed in the organized sector. And I'm talking about steel. Unfortunately, there are no figures available for stainless steel. Keeping all this in mind, and I'm just going to throw a question out there for Mr. Nehru. Do you think that we are equipped? And also, let me add on that this number expected to grow to about 110 million by 2030. Do you think we are there? Do you think that this could be the metal of the future if there is no workforce? And what are your initial thoughts on it? Of course, we'll talk about it in detail.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me over. Basically, let's look at two perspectives. One answer is we are not there, and probably the other answer is we are halfway there. Now, when I say not there and there, basically it is a dichotomy. Like people, if you are building projects which are greenfield steel projects, steel plants, there is a big vacuum in the project management skills who build actually the greenfield plants. That's part one. The part two is the skill workforce is less because A, the number is less. B, the skill which steel industry or stainless steel industry demands is very, very varied. Right from basically selection of materials to the foundry elements to the process, smelting elements, checking, cold rolling, and things like that. There is a very varied skill which is required over the supply whole life chain or life cycle of the stainless steel production. And the problem is, we feel that if I am a promoter of a steel plant and if I know everything how to do it, and I still open the steel industry or a secondary steel industry and I think it will be done, the answer is no. Because the person who produces on the ground does not understand basic ideas of quality, dimensional control, project management skills, which is, I think, everybody should know that. And primarily the skills of the demand of the customer. Now let's look at. We don't want to use always the word China, 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 but the problem is China is in your face anyway. So China, if you is one of the largest producers of steel and stainless steel in the world, and almost they're producing 53% of the total steel and stainless steel of the world. In the top 10 companies in the world, we have only one company listed there, is number 10, which is Tata Steel. So Tata Steel is one company which is listed there in terms of the capacity, and probably Jindal would follow very closely. Now, idea is it's not only the production of steel in number of metric tons or lakh metric tons. It's basically what is the quality required, what are the products required, who knows, and most important thing which we actually forget and forgive is the product design. Now, Chinese, whether you like it or not, they copy designs and they improvise it and they put it in the market, and it works for them. Okay, now neither we copy or we want to do everything from typical. Our mindset is we want to do everything from brass tacks, from rudimentary science. It doesn't work that way. Like if you remember how Japan became the largest producer of television only in one way. They imported a TV from US in the 1960s called the TV was called Thomson TV. They imported it to Japan. They opened it up and see what best they can do more than what they can do with American TVs, and they developed Sony. And Sony came as one of the largest TV producers. Still, it's as the largest producer. So idea is we are today confused. Workforce Numbers may be there, again a doubt, but a number is not useful till the numbers are not skilled. The other is which workforce? People who build the steel plant, people who run the steel plant, people who maintain the steel plant, or people who sell products. So there is vacuum everywhere. Now, see, understand. A BCom graduate, with due respect to BCom graduates, there's nothing wrong with being a BCom graduate. He can straight away go and sell an apartment. He's a builder's marketing team. He will go and say that it's a 2 bedroom, it has a vitrified tile, it has this paint, this flooring, this. He can very easily sell it because the customer will not ask you technical questions. The moment you say FE 550, the customer is going to ask is what is the durability, malleability, the strength index. They will go into technical details. So even the marketing person has to be that trained to sell the product. So it's not a stainless steel is not a product which is over the counter. It is many times products are there. They are designed for precision. And India now we are seeing a lot of use of them because especially I come from the sector of construction. Hydrocarbon, very large user of stainless steel. Real estate, airports, ports, automotive sector. They are huge now defense because L&T is very largely in defense. So it's a huge requirement of steel. And believe me, a person who works in L&T's defense company has to be very, very highly skilled because he has to probably learn robotic welding. He has to learn theory of constraints. He has to learn supply chain, critical chain concepts because he is actually producing the things on the ground. So I think today it's like a mess, you know. There is no approach. We have National Skill Development Corporation, we have Skill India movement. But again, it's like we're doing it, but not probably with a focus in mind. And vacuum is there probably. That's what my take is. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to sort of add on to that, and I'll structure the industry a bit for our listeners here. We're talking about one category, which is the upstream, which is the manufacturers. And that is, for example, Jindal Stainless, which is my company, which manufactures the flat products. Then there is a midstream, which is a pipe and tube, which manufactures the long product. And then, of course, that is the downstream industry, which actually is the manufacturing of the product at the end level, which you see and which the consumer experiences everywhere. So, question for the audience: if not just here, but if you were to ask your family that where do they experience stainless steel, what would be the answer? Utensils, because that is how we know and understand stainless steel. But is that, and that's like about 34% or 35% of the market right now. Where we are actually seeing it, which we don't even notice, we probably don't even understand it, is like, say, in metros, in malls, in railways. We are now starting to see it in railway gates, railings, etc. So we are now talking, and over the last 2 days, I think you've been talking about applications in defense. You added on defense. We are starting to talk about applications in dairy. We are starting to talk about applications in maritime. Those are unseen, but they are used. Do they require skills? Yes. So now, if I were to categorize it, like, and say that upstream, what are the, and I think you've touched upon some of those skills required, which could be, say, quality, which is what is the kind of products that are required. So, and there's a lot of skills and knowledge needed around material science over there, so that if we talk about upstream and then we move on to the midstream, there is another level of skills, and then we move on to the blue collar, which is the downstream. We move on to downstream and we move on to blue collar. So again, your thoughts on moving down the value chain, what kind of skills are required?
First of all, if you look at a manufacturer and the person who built the plants, first issue is the manufacturer has to understand the process elements vis-a-vis what product they are going to develop. So the process, and if you know, process is very different. If I want to make a stainless steel product for a locomotive or for a building, for an airport, for facades, for defense equipment, the process of manufacturing to a point will be similar and beyond a point will be different. So that that skill. And I don't think there is any course in the country which teaches how to in engineering colleges or to how to make products which are right from product design. And believe me, in L&T we have a very stringent method of designing. We call it the feed design. Feed. We call it front end engineering design. So idea of the feed is that you optimize design, you do lean manufacturing, okay, and you, with the bargain of doing all that, you train people to be able to produce and sustain and maintain the whole facility. That's one part. Now we've been training one very large public sector company in steel manufacturing, very large in India, government company, and they want to set up projects worth 2 lakh crores in the next 5 years. And the project management capability within them is very limited. They are very good engineers, very from great institutions, IITs and otherwise. But to convert a project and to spend 1.5 lakh crore rupees judiciously on the ground without delays, without having cost overruns, time overruns, process glitches is a different ball game. And L&T on the other side, today our minimum project size in L&T is 10,000 crores. That is minimum. And maximum is almost bullet train, which we are doing, which is again the steel, stainless steel element. Bullet train is 27,000 crores. And we are getting 3 more projects in a bullet train in near future. So now, if, for example, if bullet train is coming up, L&T had no experience of bullet train except doing some projects out of Riyadh or in. We have built the Mauritius Metro. We are building the Riyadh Metro, finished already. We are building the Jakarta Metro. Now comes the bullet train. It's a total different ball game. In terms of civil is very easy, but then comes to selection of the materials like steel, stainless steel, and the finishing of the product is again difficult. Now the challenge was that we wanted to buy the locos from Japan, but the project got delayed because of whatever reasons happened. Now the loco which we wanted to from Japan, the cost of the loco has gone up by 60%. Now if I buy that, I will be in a total loss and the country will be in loss. So what L&T has done, he said, okay, we'll do it in-house. Make in India, make in L&T. So we'll save that 60% cost of the exchequer just by training and understanding how that quality has to be delivered and given. So that backward integration we have to do. So that is probably at the higher level. At a middle level, we had a session on digitization. The problem is they are very good words, IoT, ML, AL, NLP, very good words. But the moment I go to ma'am, just in the context, don't mind it, I go with her proposal to her that, ma'am, I will train your people on IoT or MI, AL, data science. So first question is, what will it cost? Because she thinks that the moment I train my person in my company, next day he's going to prepare his CV, update it, and go to a different company. We in L&T have a very huge budget of training. Every year, L&T spends 300 crore rupees only in training, in internal people, right? All levels. Now, if we would have thought the same way, we don't think that way. We think if the person goes in this industry, at least the industry will benefit. And we also know that after 5 years, he's going to come back to L&T only because we know this is just a circle, Same would happen in CSC. So instead of being little conscious of, okay, if I invest on the person and he will run away, she will run away, don't worry about that. They will improve the industry as a whole and it will ultimately come back to it. So that is the mass level training. Now workers. If I tell by labor, can you make the steel in the lean system? He will understand nothing out of it. So you'll have to roll out that particular system from top to bottom, top-down approach, and make him understand what is lean. Now, if I say, okay, we have Eli Goldratt, he's father of project management, he talks of critical chain, he understands zilch, he doesn't know what it is. But the moment you understand, okay, lean means optimum in, optimum out, process optimum, process control optimum, output optimum, productivity optimum, then probably and create standards for it, then only he or she will create that training. So I think at every level, and stainless steel industry is very peculiar because at every level the skill sets are different. And you cannot I cannot say I'm a specialist from upstream to downstream. It's very difficult to do that. So challenge lies with training anyway.
Yeah. I'm just going to quickly sort of also talk a little bit about Stainless Academy over here because what we did, Mr. Nehru, was we realized that there are no skills in the downstream industry to be able to cope with making or fabrication of products with SS. So the whole objective of the Stainless Academy is to create a skills ecosystem for just for stainless steel sector. So right from the white collar to the blue collar, and all for the downstream. So one of the things that we're doing, and think it's not stated enough, and to me personally, and of course data also suggests it's a worldwide problem, is the need for skilled welders and fabricators. And now we're not talking, I mean, we are talking about the one on the road who's making stuff, but we need even for, say, the bridges coming up, for the railway coaches that are getting made, for the buses that are getting made, for all these. You need very high skilled fabricators and welders. I know L&T, not just in your institute, but others also has done, started work long time ago on this entire, and y'all are known as the masters of fabrication. What about, so what are your thoughts on that entire need of fabrication, welding, and those skills at the worker and the blue collar level?
Okay, I will just take a context from the previous session. There are two words here we are using: digitization and automation. Digitization basically is enabling higher precision, higher quality, higher durability. Automation sometimes means replacing manpower. Okay. So as L&T, as India, we cannot do the second one because we have to be careful about the fact that we have people and people need jobs. Okay. That's one part. So wherever I require precision, quality, exact dimension control, I will go for robotics or robot aligned thing or IoT based lathe machines and things like that. But where I require a mass handling of, but say handling of material, forgings, which do not require very high precision quality, there I could train my people. There's one more problem in not maybe in stainless steel industry, but maybe in my industry. The person who's sitting as a general manager, I am a vice president of L&T, and I have never touched cement with my hand, and I have never touched a brick on my hand, never touched a use of JCB myself. I can't dictate how the skill, what skill is required on downstream.
Well
I
said.
need good quality of cement, concrete. What does it mean? If I have not made concrete in my life, I can't dictate the good quality. So the top person has to actually be unskilled. He has to come from, I'll not say he has to be a mason or a welder, but he has to understand what are the qualities, issues, demands, and SS is a very, I think it's a product and it's a high value element, high value material. So one quotation comes to here that if I say I don't need training because I am the CEO of the company, but madam would need training or everyone good training. So there is a context which we work on training. It says minds and parachutes are same. They work only when they're open. Okay, so everyone has to be trained right from the top to bottom, and new technologies, new things are coming every day. Okay, now you can't adopt new things every day in manufacturing because you have to have your process equipment, process machinery has to be there. I'll give an example. Gujarat State Fertilizer Corporation, which was set up in 1962. If you go to that in Baroda, all the machines there are either British, American, or Italian, and all of them are 1960s, and all of them are leaking, breaking, making noises, and entire stuff. So now L&T was got in the project to replace and upgrade the entire system. And believe me, even the project management of such a event, such a modernization of a plant, a factory is very difficult, safety wise, quality wise, project management wise, and skill wise. Okay. So what are we looking at? We are looking at, especially in the SS industry, stainless steel industry, lot of varied skills are there. So let's divide them into, as maybe forging skills, skills for melting, bending, product design, project management of setting up new steel plants. So they're very varied skills. Okay. So we were doing some training for SAIL India, and we introduced a concept called advanced work packaging. Advanced work packaging is a concept used in hydrocarbon, primarily to plan, design, and manage a project from greenfield construction with the idea of optimization and lean management. Okay. So you cannot say I buy a BMW and I say no, I want to get average of Maruti in that. It won't happen. Or vice versa. I buy a Maruti and say I want to have the comfort of BMW. It won't happen. So you have to design what you want, and everybody in that chain, value chain, knowledge chain, has to know what product has to be delivered. Okay. Now, seriously, also it happens, ma'am. Like we are making kitchen equipment. Now, kitchen equipment is made. It's not a high tech, probably a high tech industry. But if I want to make facade for an airport using stainless steel, it's a very high tech forging. So the skills are very, very varied and the quantum changes a lot. So it's not an easy industry to really work on skilling. But somewhere we have to start. So I think we are doing a bit. I think.
Yeah. Uh, again, if you look at, and I firmly believe that engineers have been probably India's greatest asset, our IT, the growth of the IT industry, and the next few years, which is dedicated to manufacturing. Yes, the engineers are going to be the ones. At that stage, and at that academic level, what are some of your suggestions that what should we do so that their work and their aspiration to work in this sector also increases?
No, aspiration basically comes from three things. One is if I'm skilled, what will be my wages and how will it improve my lifestyle? That's one. Second is stainless steel, if you ask, is really a contributor to the national economy in many ways. L&T is making a cryostat. I don't know whether you know cryostat. Cryostat basically is where we allow the neutrons to run in a very high speed to create energy. And we are doing this with government of France. And the precision there is the welding precision, the tolerance is 0.001 mm. And that is being done in Hazira plant in L&T Hazira plant in India, in Gujarat. And the people who are working for it, have been trained in France, workers. They have been sent to France, 200 of them, trained there. And they feel that they are part of nation building because it's a cryostat is a national level, international level, atomizer. So I think there is a lot of pride linked to it, and of course, uh, training just at a low level, but just producing normal SS is one thing, but doing high precision jobs, doing product management in SS is quite a difficult. And then the demand. Now, who is driving the demand? The driving demand drivers are the architects or the designers. So, our responsibility is also to go to designers and architects to educate them that okay, this is the product available or this is the product possible that we can do it for in airports or you could see the Turkey airport. I don't want to use the word Turkey, but Turkey airport Terminal 2 is the largest airport in the world today, and they have used almost 84,000 tons of stainless steel inside there. And like the earlier team was talking about digital twin, we talk about BIM, building information modeling, 5D, 4D, 6D. So they have used all that. And the workers, workers now who are building or who are welding or who are riveting or who are attaching the stainless steel components, they don't have drawings physical. They have it on the platform, on the tabs, 3D drawings, BIM modeling. They see the clashes with the structure, with the architecture, and they are very savvy. If you go to India today and on a site of Sail India or any other site, you tell a person to follow a drawing on a iPad, he would probably be able to. So that's also part of training. So it's not necessary that only the CEO and the GM or a VP is savvy with IT. I think the last man in the job has to be savvy with IT.
Yeah, so there is definitely this, and I think they touched upon it, and to my mind, didn't discuss it in enough detail. That as we are stepping in, what is the need for reskilling and upskilling the workforce? Like you said, that you have this entire workforce, but the tools and technologies are changing around how to deploy them at the end level. So, how at the reskilling and upskilling level? So, my question over here would actually be that uh, how do we reach the MSME sector? Because the large ones are much easier to do, but a lot of the fabrication, a lot of the work is also being done at the lower level. So, how do we address that challenge?
Okay. Once we know that we have a lot of people employed in the MSME sector in various categories, skilled, semi-skilled, or raw skills. There is a scheme under Government of India under NSDC. It's called the RPL scheme, if you know that, recognition of prior learning. Idea is you take them in, check their learning and skills, and see where they are, and from there you build their skills to a higher level. So that RPL is quite a standard format. It has an apprenticeship mode also under NSDC. The problem is when NSDC started, we have a very large steel council in NSDC, but the use is limited. It's only certifying people, not training. So it has to go from recognition prior learning to apprenticeship mechanism and teaching those. And MSMEs can take good advantage of that actually, and because it is meant for them.
Okay.
So I think that's the way forward, bro.
So, because I come from NSDC and I was also the first employee of NSDC, I know your chairman was the chairman of NSDC for some time. Question is, and that sort of naturally brings me to the next stage, but I will also come back to one more aspect which I want to talk about is the importance of R&D and creating new materials and the possibility over there. But now, logically, so if I were to look at it, there are three main stakeholders. One would be, apart from the end user of skills, which is the student or the employee, the first would be the government, the second would be industry, and of course, the third is the academic institutions, and I will include ITIs also over there. Uh, would you like to like a little bit on what kind of roles and responsibilities each should be playing, and more so from the industry point of view?
Let me put R&D in a context here. R&D has three elements here. One is R&D is for brushing your competition. That's one role of R&D. Second R&D is to develop innovative products. That is the second role. And third R&D is whatever products you have, how to make them better. Okay. Now it depends on the focus of the organization. What is the level of R&D they're doing? Mostly R&D in Indian context is more of a reaction to competition. To China is doing X, I will do X minus one. But that's not right way. Right way is to understand that what I can do much better and build a better product than anybody can offer. So I think R&D and India suffers. We do the moment you put a budget for R&D. I'll tell you, our defense company in last 7 years, our defense company has burnt 8,000 crores. Burnt, and nobody bothers because we know that once we, in fact, we got a lot of orders. I don't want to give you the name of the weapons and all because it's a little classified. After spending 8,000 crores in defense, especially welding and other all using metals and all, and we got order book today of 17,000 crores. After spending 8,000 crores at 17,000 crores and profitability of almost 50%. Okay. So if you worry about R&D as a cost, then you will never improve, never improvise. Okay. So probably, again, is it competitive? Is it your way of developing a new industry? Or is it basically a knee-jerk reaction? If it's a knee-jerk reaction, then it won't be sustainable. But if it is basically your way of improvising the industry and your own organization, probably that is the right way to go about R&D.
So, question here, like, and I take from the US education system as well. A lot of the R&D is also done at the academic institutions, and the cooperation between the or the rather the collaboration between the industry and the academic institution. How important is that now in the Indian scenario?
The problem is in India, we do not have a technical university. The only technical university which came up was UPS in Dehradun. That was on the petroleum sector and all. And it could not survive because there were no takers for a technical university. So it started to start MBA, engineering, all the stuff. Okay. There is no technical university in construction, no technical university in stainless steel or hydrocarbon, no one. We are learning hydrocarbon by building plants in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in Oman, in Middle East. Okay. We are building more solar power plants after L&T in Uzbekistan. I was there just 2 days back in Tashkent. We are building one of the largest solar power plants in there of almost 8 gigawatts. 8 gigawatt is $8 billion straight away. And most of the trackers and the support systems are stainless steel, okay, that we are using. But 80% of that is being imported from China. For a simple reason that Uzbekistan has a border with China and the trucks can come by road. Okay. So if we start producing such products and we start understanding that our supply chains will improve because of indigenous production, then probably that will help. But there is a big dearth of any technical university. Which university talks about making dams or highways as an engineering 4-year program? There's a university in Sri Lanka which talks about which has a BTech program in quantity surveying, just estimation. And the Sri Lankans in the last 30 years are the best QS people in the world. If you go to Middle East, if you look at QS trade, it is dominated by Sri Lankans.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It is. And we are nowhere. We are generalists. We will talk about IoT, AI, ML, construction, everything. But we are not specialists to anything. Now, and if you in L&T, the problem is we have a joke. L&T is called a learning and training organization because a lot of training happens. And even the HR person in L&T is a BTech in civil engineering. Even the HR, even every man, every person, every lady is an engineer because that is the way the company has grown.
Yeah.
The CMD today was a GET 35 years back, Mr. SN Subramanian. So this is, but the problem is our education system lacks any technical. The moment you say technical input, we are scared. Like hydrocarbon. Hydrocarbon today, look at Oman, Qatar. L&T just got a project from the Qatar Oil Corporation for 18,000 crores, and from Algeria government for 24,000 crores. Do we understand numbers? 20,000 crores, Indian company bagging a project, earning profits, getting back to India. It's a huge this, but the skills required are very different there. So probably this we lack this technical approach, and again the problem is we are a more rote education. We wrote, we remember, we mug up. We are not an experiential education where we experience, we apply. It's not like that. It's so our kids go to US and they do a great job there because they have a bent of mind, and then they go to analytics and they do well. So I remember in IIT when I was studying there, there was a board there. Somebody put a board and wrote it. It is an export-oriented unit, IIT Delhi, because everybody there got good jobs out of India and nobody stayed back. So probably we should not be a EOU, and we have to improve our education system within India.
Yeah. I think, to be fair, also, I find that the government is making efforts. They understand the importance of it. Probably we'll start seeing the fruits of this maybe in another 10, 15 years. For example, IIT Delhi has now just revamped its curriculum. We are in talks with Gati Shakti Vishwavidyalaya, which is a university specializing just in transportation and logistics. And then IIT Madras, of course, is famous for the kind of innovations that they've already started producing. But I do find that the appetite to undertake research, the appetite to take on new things is very less by the deans and the professors. There is a sort of shyness over there as well, and it may come from the lack of skills to be actually able to do it. How can industry support them, and how can we work with our universities to make them better?
Okay, that's a very simple way to do it. Every PhD should be sponsored by an industry. And what we now do within L&T, we go, in fact, we are a training center of excellence for L&T, training arm. But we don't do only training. We also do internal advisory in L&T. So there's a pain point, technical, commercial, techno-commercial. We go and do internal advisory and we build those capacities. So idea here is that we should, as you rightly said, the HODs, the deans themselves, okay, they are probably sitting at a good, cozy place, but they never have done research. I was working on a project called in IIT Kharagpur, and we were building these biocells. And this was done by a person who is a civil engineer. I said, how come you're a civil engineer and you're making a biocell? How can biocell and civil engineering go together? He said, when you go to the higher levels of engineering, it becomes biotechnology. The more you go higher in engineering, you ultimately go to life sciences. Okay, this is what he said. Okay, so probably that is what we have to remember.
Yeah. I think the lot more investment also needs to be made by industry at the academic institutions, because and there is a need, like another challenge we've been facing, for example, are there standards in the stainless steel industry? We were talking about construction or making of bridges. Now there is a certain technology that, so there's a certain software that is required, but there are no skilled engineers. Okay, I've been given the time thing. It's an interesting and a very important topic for all of us. So, last but not the least, what about interventions required at the ITIs and the industrial training institutes, which is really the bedrock of where the workforce of India comes from?
Now you have to understand, ma'am, ITI is the only institution, maybe at a much lower level, which talks about technology. We train them in welding, we train them in lathe machines, operations. It's the only institution, and it is the most weakest link in the whole key of institution in India. Weakest link. Many IITs are actually closing down. And some who are not closing down have been adopted by companies like ourselves and L&T. We have L&T almost has 20 ITIs under our, and they are doing a very good job. So idea is any ITI, every ITI should be linked to industry. It should be adopted by the industry, and it should become your workshop, an extended workshop where you young boys and girls who come from rural areas or other catchments, they could be trained there and they could value add your company. So I think it's happening, but only the top few companies
Yeah.
are doing it.
We recently have just started a 155-hour top-up course for fitters. And the course only talks about SS fabrication. We give them the tools and techniques because at least those kids should be able to, they're 16, 17, 18. So they should be able to.
I'll give you a point here. I was working in Africa, in Ethiopia, and I was working on one of the sites. We are doing a bridge. And nearby a very nice building was coming up. And we had always a problem with labor coming from India, from Africa and all. But this building site has huge labor done by a Chinese contractor. Labor were like in hundreds of numbers. I said to my project team, I said, why do we don't have so much labor? They have so much labor. And I want to go into the site and visit. He said, no, sir, don't go there. I said, why? Well, the labor there are Chinese. I said, so what? Sir, the labor there are Chinese crooks who are in jails for petty robberies, theft, and knife brandishing, and they have got them to Africa. They pay them 2 cigarettes boxes and $100 a month. So I don't want we have to get down to that level of resource management.
Yeah.
But this is China can do that because they don't have limitations. We have certain
Yeah.
limitations. But my basic problem is we don't have a technical skill university for various trades, including stainless steel trades in India. And we have to look at getting
Yeah.
them up. Yeah.
I think we are now investing as Stainless Academy to create standards and curriculum just for the stainless steel sector. That how do we work with, and we're working with the government, both at the white collar level. We've already created some qualification packs, but I agree with you that working with the sector skill councils and all, and getting them sensitized to the importance of these specific and high end applications is a challenge because they work on the masses. So, and I think we need to move beyond the masses right now. Okay, so I think we've covered a whole gamut in terms of the white collar, the R&D, the blue collar, the upstream, midstream, downstream, and we could be talking here for hours once we start. But I will now throw it open for questions if there are any questions from.
One point before we throw it out to you. 47% of industrial workers in Italy are Indian Punjabis, by the way. Indian Punjabis.
वो यहाँ पे नहीं करेंगे उधर जाके.
That's a different issue, but not that they're skilled. Somewhere they have the skill where at Italian industry, where the stainless steel automotive is very high tech. It's not low tech. But if the person from Punjab, Pind, Ludhiana, Jalandhar can go to Italy and get a job there and be skilled and earn money, I think we have somewhere to.
Yeah, the capability is there, the mind is there, the brain is there.
Opportunity has to be there.
Yeah. I'm Rajiv Thakur. I'm from a MSME company known as Fortran Steel. We are also into the business of stainless steel. I have certain observation when I heard from both the expert panelists, and something came up in my mind, which I thought that I should share with you.
Yeah.
For last 3 days, we are talking about stainless steel. We are not touching upon the commercial angle. Why stainless steel is only 4.5 million ton, as against 140 million ton of steel produced last year. So you can well imagine the percentage of stainless steel in Indian market. Total is 63 million ton overall, 40 million ton is China. So my question is that the most important part for the stainless steel usage and skilling is that first of all, we should know where we can replace with the mild steel. The moment we come to know the replacement part, then we should go into nitty gritty, like whether the present workforce will be able to do fabrication, other processing job or not. And the second part is that the customer, small customer in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, the people from the stainless steel group, they should convince them by doing a cost benefit analysis that why stainless steel is more suitable than mild steel. The moment we start doing, I don't know whether JSL is doing it or not. I'm not aware about. I was in Jindal also, JSPL. So my question is, then only we'll be able to penetrate more and more in the market. Our target for 2030 is 6 million ton consumption. If you translate into the production with a 60% capacity utilization, it is not going beyond 10 million ton.
Yes, sir.
So my question or request to you is that these are the doubts which are in my mind. And
Sure.
since you both of them, she is expert in flat, Rajiv, you are expert in both long product as well as flat products in stainless steel. So I think I'll be able to acquire some knowledge from you whereby we can really push stainless steel where the mild steel is occupying the position. Thank you.
I'll respond to you from the skills point of view, not from the demand. I mean, the marketing point of view. Does your marketing person sell stainless steel, or does he create a demand for stainless steel? You have to think yourself. If you sell stainless steel, that you would never have the scenario which you're saying. But if you create a demand for SS by being more knowledgeable about industry and by being more knowledgeable about product, then probably that skilling will help you to get more demand for SS and the usages. Because if you go to an architect today and tell him, sir, MS versus SS versus aluminum, cost wise, life cycle costing, green footprint, these are the advantages. But is your marketing man so knowledgeable that he can do that? Or he's just selling the steel? Okay. So let's retrospect. I would prefer that in skilling your marketing person, which is a upstream person, should get skilled. Like I'll give you an example about was doing trading with Tata Godrej Properties. Godrej is a very big developer in Bombay. You know that. Now they couldn't sell 2 flats a month. It was very difficult for them to sell flats in Dahisar or other places because of whatever reason was there. Because a marketing person was talking about, sir, it is a door, it's a window, it's a tile. So the customer says, which type of tile? He said, vitrified tile. He said, which vitrified? Soluble salt, double body, or full body? Zapped. No answer. So if your marketing man has no answer, how will you convince the buyer? Okay. And then we trained Godrej Properties for 1 month boot camp and converted this sales guy to technical sales guy, and they sold one project in Noida, 200 villas in 6 days flat. Okay, so that's how a techno commercial guy can make wonders. So I think it's the answer would be more of skilling on that context. Thank you.
Sorry, we're not going to take any more questions after this, but I'll also talk about one of the big challenges that we see, and that I think is what you are asking. There's no category awareness. There's no understanding in the future, current and future workforce, that what are the benefits of using SS, life cycle costing, for example, and how do you use, which grade do you use, for what particular application do you use. We haven't even reached there, but just a basic understanding of SS. So one of our objectives is category awareness. We call it category awareness, that go out into the institutions who are going to be the future workforce and start talking about benefits of SS. It's frankly, I mean, it's everywhere there, right? Like, we are sustainable, it's the green metal, anti-corrosion, long life cycle. But how do we get that message across? How do we get that knowledge across? So we have started in engineering institutions, and that is why we are going to ITIs. That is why we are going to where the supply is coming from. 10 years from now also, if that guy remembers that I learned stainless steel and the benefits of it, to some extent we will
Ma'am,
increase.
and I'll add here, the stainless steel sector, everybody knows. Even a kid who carries a lunchbox knows stainless steel. Our housewives, they know what is stainless steel. Everybody knows. It's just a matter of giving validated products. Everybody knows what is SS. So you don't have to introduce a new product. Right from the kid last 50 years, we know what stainless steel is. Okay. So I think we are halfway there, probably with some more.
Yeah,
yes.
more discussion later. So thank you everyone for being a
Thank you.
great audience.